Hi everyone, this is Nick from Mapthusiast, and today we are going to talk about Phairos Studio, specifically about land. Land is the first of the object types, and it is maybe one of the easiest. So let's jump right in. I just selected land, and you could see on the left side everything was blank, but now we have an object here called landmass 3, and we have something in the properties panel which we're going to talk about. So land is something that you just draw like with a brush. In this case, the brush is the orange thing around the mouse, and when you just click on the screen, you can see land is generated. Now, you can change the way you generate land in the properties panel. Now, for example, you have the type. In this case, it's spiky. Right now, what we have, it doesn't look very spiky. But if we go to ruffle and turn this up a notch, then you'll see that this gets much more spiky. So basically that means the ruffle setting, if it's all the way to 0, it's going to be super smooth. And if it's all the way up to 100, it's going to be very ruffled. We also have a size option, but this just changes the size of the brush, small brush. And we can also do that via control, and then using the mouse wheel, we increase brush size. We can also erase land using this toggle. Then when we click, we don't generate land anymore, we just remove it. We can also do that by clicking again Control. So Control is basically our key to do everything. Now, when we use the mouse wheel, it goes up and down with the size. And if we click, we will remove land. We can also fill the map entirely with land. Just clicking on this button, you see now everything is land. We can still remove land. So this could be an ocean or a lake. And we can delete this entire land if we are not satisfied with that. Let's do that and let's start fresh. Let's create a new land object. There we are. All right. Now, this is basically a very manual way of creating land. We can also create land using our library. So let's say you want to draw a map of, in this case, for example, Russia. You want to use these shapes for a different purpose. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you have these shapes pre-filled already in Phairos Studio. We have a lot of islands, countries, continents, areas. Here, for example, Italy, but we also have Sardinia as an island separate. So you can place that here as you like. And it's going to be a land. You can also turn this either with the shortcut Q or E buttons, just like this, or by rotating with the slider. You can also make the land bigger. That was way too big, or much smaller. You might want to use this feature not in order to create real-life islands or countries, but just to use the shapes for your own fantasy world. So let me remove this. Let's go to round, crank up the size, and then just remove some of this land here. And let's go back to library. Now this is obviously a real world island, but if I just add more stuff to this, at some point it's going to be unrecognizable. Obviously some land masses are more recognizable than others, but at some point, especially if you rotate and mirror things, people are going to have a hard time noticing what this actually is. So you're using real life coastlines or shapes in order to draw your own fantasy world. And this is obviously very, very clear. This less so. So feel free to use these. Can be very helpful. But you can also use your own very own assets. You see here, this is just Earth. There's space for more, and we can see how we can do that in the world view. So if you click on this little icon, this globe, we are in the world view now, so we can save our map. So everything when it comes to organization is in here. But we also have a library of land. So here we have the basic shapes. So this is what we just created, what we just used. But we also can add more stuff. So here we have 3 sections: Earth, Fantasy, and Other. That's just for your organization. They work exactly the same. If you click this, it's going to open a dialog. You go to wherever you have your folder of custom, land, and then you just import this. So the folder must contain PNG files. So PNG is kind of the file type that we use for all these libraries. And the land has to be surrounded by transparency. So if you, for example, here, see Brazil, everything around this is transparent, and it doesn't actually matter what color you have inside as long as it is not transparent. And that's going to be the shape of your landmass. So feel free to import anything you like. It's going to be copied to the Phairos Studio folder, and it's going to be always available within this menu. You can then see it, and within the library here, you can select it, and you can select the different categories here. So much for library. And now let's quickly go to Paint. You can see now I have selected a color white, and also my circle here is white. If I now just click on the map, it will create a bit of a white coloring tint. And the longer I hover over this while I click, the more bright it gets. And that's because the force here is set to 100%. Now, if I turn the force down to 28%, then basically it cannot go higher than that, even if I click very long. The speed is what determines how long you have to click in order to get to this force. So if I turn this very high, it's going to be very short, and I'm going to reach this fast. While if I turn this to 1, it's going to be, super slow. Let's turn this a bit higher. So it takes more time, which gives you basically more time to just, wiggle around and distribute this in a more natural way. Again, here we have the size, and you can erase color as well. And same as with the land, if you click Control, then you can remove this without having to click this toggle like that. And what we just saw is actually interesting. We click Control, and now we see this button here. This button always comes up in the middle of the landmass, and you can move the landmass as you like. The color will move with it. And if you have another landmass, so let's right click. We are now outside of our object. We can create a new object. Let's create a second landmass. Just here. Let's pretend this is a small island just off the coast. We can make this also move, and then it will move independently from the other landmass. But we can also make this a child object. Now, a child object can still move independently. That's not a problem. But if the parent moves, the child will move with it. And at the same point, when the parent is invisible, the child is invisible. But we can make the child invisible without affecting the parent at all. We can also create a new group and put both of these inside, which will help us with visibility, but it will not help us with, moving. If you want to move them, automatically you have to create a parent-child relationship. So that was land. And I think that's it for this tutorial. Next time we're going to continue with the other objects, rivers, paths and borders. Areas are very interesting. And we're also going to look at overlays, namely grids, windroses, scales, and about themes. But we're gonna take our time with that, one tutorial video at a time. So thanks a lot for listening. If you have any questions about specifically land, but also other stuff, post that in the comment. I'll try to answer as much as I can. You can also visit our Discord channel. That is linked below. You can purchase the game, of course, and not the game, the program on Steam. There's also a link in the description of this video. So check that out and see you in the next video. Thanks so much for joining and have fun creating your maps. Bye bye. Hello, this is Nick from Mapthusiast, and we're going to look at Phairos Studio today. Specifically, we're going to look at land. Land is one of the 6 main object types in the program, and it's the first one that you have to draw on every map. So let's dive in. If I now release my mouse here on this, it's going to create a new land object. And right now the left toolbar here is pretty empty, but very soon it's going to have one more object. Here we go, landmass 2. That's because I created another landmass before that. And we also see that we have a properties panel now with certain options and, very important, a tutorial video. If you feel lost or maybe you don't know exactly what you can do with a feature, check it out. We also have a info box that's going to give you some basic tips on how to use the mouse and the buttons in order to achieve certain goals. But now let's go into this. Now, the properties panel is relatively simple for land, and that's because land only really has the brush to set properties. Right now, when I click on this ocean here, it's going to draw something which is a bit rough. You see it's not perfectly round, it has a couple of edges, and that's because we are in spiky mode. Now it doesn't look really spiky right now, and that's because we have a ruffle setting here, which is currently at 25. If we tune this up, let's say 71, then if we draw something, it's going to have much more pronounced spikes. But that's only the first mode. We have a second mode, which is fuzzy, and that's going to give you a more fuzzy coastline. The third mode is round, so this is just plain. It is the same effect as if you would be in spiky mode and turn the ruffledness all the way to 0. So that's just a shortcut basically, but it also gives you the option of having a very big brush. Okay, back to spiky mode. That's kind of the default, and it looks kind of okay. You can not only draw land like this, but you can also erase it with this toggle here very easily. You can also do that if you don't have this toggle. So currently I'm drawing land, and if I hold down Control, I can erase land. While I'm holding down Control, I can also use the mouse wheel to basically make this smaller or bigger. I can fill the entire map with land if I want to. So let's do that. It will create one big landmass. I can still use my brush in order to create ocean. Or well, to remove the land, but it looks like I'm creating ocean. And here as well, then I can create land again. Easy. Let's remove this because we want to talk about some more functions of how to create land. This was now all very manual, but we can make use of our library. So this is very useful if you want to either use real-life shapes for your coastlines, or if you want to just, have a certain country or island that already exists in the real world. So let's say South America. Yeah, you have that here as a template. You can just click it and it's going to be here. You can also change the rotation either with the Q and E buttons or with the rotate slider quite easily. You can also mirror this, and this is going to be very helpful, the rotation and the mirroring, if you want to make your own fantasy world, as I said, with the coastlines of the real world. So right now, this is obviously South America, but if I just add a couple more things here, you're not going to be able to distinguish this anymore, um, and not even going to be able to tell that this used to be South America because the coastlines can look completely different. Some coastlines are obviously better suited for this than others. Like this is very flat, doesn't actually look very real. Um, and some of them are not even coastlines, but just country borders. And for some countries, that's going to look um, very flat. But you see maybe what I mean. Yeah. So you can create a reasonably weird continent out of real life shapes, and I don't think anybody's gonna tell you that this part is actually a real world coast. However, you can not only do this, but you can bring in your own assets. So right now this is all real world shapes, but if you go to the world view, first of all, let's go back to draw. Um, in the world view, first of all, you see now basically the entire map. You can save your map, but we're talking about land. So let's go to the library of land. You have many libraries, and here you can see if you go to this, these are all the land shapes that we saw before, and they are part of this Earth category. You can add more folders to this if you want. So if you have other shapes that you think are missing, but you can also add something in the fantasy category or in the other category. Don't worry about where you really put it because you can. It has the same effect, so it doesn't matter if you put it in fantasy or earth, other than your own organization. And as it says here, you can, you have this icon. Basically, these are going to be invisible if you click this icon. So if you feel like adding a lot of images and later feel like you don't want them anymore, either you can remove them. This comes with Phairos, so you cannot remove this, or you can just hide them if you don't want them for your current map. Right, so let's go back to our map. This is, by the way, panorama mode. If you are wondering what that is, it basically allows you to just, click your objects. You maybe add an image from your computer. You add a small description, just kind of for your own, note taking when it comes to both land, but also other objects. Right. Back to the landmass. Themes are very important here because we are now going to talk about color. We're not going to really talk about themes, but just know that the theme is basically determining the color of your land in general. So when I change something here, you will see the land change, but there's not going to be any local changes to the land. For that, I would have to select the land again and go to the Paint tab. And the Paint tab then gives me a different brush, so you can see it has a white circle. If I change the color, it's going to change the circle. So this is the color that I draw. So if I feel like drawing grassland, that's what it's going to do. If I feel like drawing snow, that's what it's going to do. And these are two different settings that are very important. One is the force and one is the speed. Force means if I press long enough, it's going to take over 100%. If I reduce that, then it doesn't matter how long I press, it will never go above 34%. And the speed basically just dictates how long I have to press. So if I put this to 100, it's very fast. It will reach this early. if I put this down to a low number, it will take its time. Basically, this is important for when you want to move around, right? So a lower speed is normally good because then you can take your time, moving your mouse without making everything feel artificial. You can also erase the color that you put in. With this toggle, similar to land, you don't have to press this. You can also just press Control, and then you can erase it like this. Right, and as you saw, there's a weird little button here, which means you can move land. So you don't need to stay here all the time. You can just move land around as you like. And let's create another island here. Small side island. This is now a different object, and objects behave independent from another. So if I paint now on this island, I can do that, but it will not paint here. Very important distinction. And also, I can move this into this land, and it will, it will be its own thing. So make sure that you understand how these lands kind of work together. The important part here is that you can make these child objects of one another. So now landmass 4 is a child object, meaning if I move the parent, the child's going to move with the parent. But if I move the child, the parent does not move. Also, if I make the child invisible, it's just going to be invisible by its own. If I toggle the parent invisible, both will be invisible. Similarly, if I put them in a group and they are not now related in a child-parent relationship, they're just by themselves, but in a group, I can make the group invisible and they're going to both disappear. I cannot move them now together because the group doesn't move. But again, I can make them child-parent to each other, and then I can move them together. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope that gets you on the right path to drawing your own maps with Phairos Studio. We're very excited about Phairos Studio, obviously, and you can find the link to Phairos Studio on Steam in the description below. You can also find the link to our Discord channel below. There we can have discussions about how to draw your maps, what kind of features you can have with Phairos Studio. But also, if you have any questions, post them in the comments below, obviously, especially about land this time. And we're going to cover more functions about this program. We're going to go through all the object types, and we're going to cover, more general how to do something. If you don't want to miss any updates, subscribe to the channel, stay tuned, and see you next time. Thanks a lot again. Bye-bye.